Hello everyone, it's Miss Petoniak here with your video for today. We are starting a new unit, so we're going to talk about some possibly new information. We're going to be talking about story elements. So this is our introduction video to Unit 2, which is all about watching how characters develop throughout a story, how events develop throughout a story, and in order for us to really get a good grasp on what that means, we have to learn the basics first. So we're going to start here with characters. A character in a story is usually a person or an animal. They're the focus of the story. They help to move the story's plot forward. If there were no characters, there would be no story because there's no action happening to nobody. Your character can be a protagonist, which is usually the hero of your story, or your character could be the antagonist, which could be your villain of the story. Most stories have multiple characters that fall into multiple genres. For example, Emmett Brakowski is one of the main characters in the Lego Movie. Okay, setting. The setting is where the story takes place, but it's also when the story takes place. Very important to know that. A story could take place in New York, but if it took place in, let's say, 1800s New York, that would be a very, very different New York than 2019 New York. The characters and setting of a story work together and interact with each other to help create a story's plot. Sometimes the setting of a story really helps further the plot. Sometimes the setting is somewhat inconsequential, which means that it doesn't really matter to the plot, but that depends on the story. For example, the Pink Palace is one of the settings in the movie Coraline. The plot. The plot is the events that happen in a story, but there are several different subsections within that. A story usually begins with the introduction or exposition, which is when you are introduced to your characters. You get to know a little bit about them through background information, their interactions with people really early on in the story. You also have your rising action. That's usually when the story starts. If the hero is given a quest, they start to figure out what they need to accomplish on their quest. They start going on their quest. If it's a really simple story, like a slice of life, kids hanging out in school, it's building up to this big confrontation or conflict that is going to happen later in the story. Your climax happens during the middle of the story. It's the most important part of the story. It's when something really bad happens to the characters, or if it's like an action adventure, it's right when they're getting to the thing that they need, or where they're just about to fight the bad guy that they've been looking for the entire time. After that, you have the falling action, which are the events after the climax. So the story's starting to wind down. There's still some events happening, but you know that the most important part of the story has already happened by this point. And then the very end of our little diagram is the resolution. It's the end of your story. It's the conclusion. Everything is all wrapped up nice. Your characters may or may not have had a happy ending. All right, conflict. I used that word on the previous slide, so we're going to talk about that a little more. Well, conflict is a problem that drives the action of a story. Now, this can be something extreme, like a villain is trying to take over the world or something. It can be something small, like a student is trying out for a club at school and they don't know if they're going to be able to make it in. It gives a story its why. So the conflict, it tells us why does the character have to do this thing? Why does the character need to travel to this place? The conflict is that driving force of the story. There are different types of conflict. External conflict is your outside forces. So the character is interacting with something. And I have a little image right here. So man versus man, very simple, fighting someone versus someone else. You have man versus society. So maybe, let's say Hunger Games, if that would be a good example. Katniss versus the ideals of Pandem. I don't even remember if that's what it's called. Sorry. But it's Katniss versus the rest of the capital and all that stuff. Man versus Nature, if you've ever seen any of those, I forgot what they're called. Those like nature movies, like 2012, if you've ever seen Earthquake, if you've ever seen Twister, things like that. And then you have internal conflict, inside forces, man versus self. That's when you start getting into moral questions. Your character might be thinking, should I trust this person? Am I making the right decision? Like, should I really make this choice? Does this go against like my ethics, my personal moral code? That's your kind of internal. And finally, we're going to talk about theme. The theme is the message, moral, or idea that the writer is delivering in their story. So what has the character learned as they've gone through this journey? What have you learned by spending time with this character on their journey? The theme is usually showed by what a character or characters have learned through the conflict of the story. Maybe they've learned something like patience is really good. Maybe they've learned something like it's really important to rely on other people when times are getting tough. As per suggestion from my sister, the theme of the Lorax is if you want to see something change or improve, then you have to put in effort for it to do that. Okay. I hope this cleared up anything if anyone was confused about any story elements. Please remember that there is a quiz that follows this on Canvas, so please take time to just take that quiz and read all the directions on the quiz. I'll see you guys soon. Have a really good day.